No one suspected the old man's guitar in the mountains, until his music inspired the young people and revealed his courage during the Korean War. Welcome to Human Stories. Before we begin, share in the comments which city you're watching this video from today. Nestled among the small but proud peaks of the Rocky Mountains in the heart of Colorado was a village called Silverton. It was barely noticeable on the world map, but the landscape, woven with strips of forests and snow-capped peaks, bestowed a fairy tale-like tranquility upon the region. Time in the village seemed to follow the rhythm of nature. Mornings were slow, evenings peaceful. The houses were made of wood, their roofs sometimes covered in snow, sometimes echoing the rhythmic sounds of rain. On the outskirts of Silverton stood a cabin slightly older than the others. From the outside, it looked simple, almost forgotten. But to overlook the cabin was to overlook what was inside. The man who lived there, Tom Eldridge, was a gray-haired, slender, usually quiet man. He was rarely seen during the day, but when evening came, he would sit on his porch, take his old guitar in his lap, and bring the notes to life with his fingertips. Tom's melodies were not complex, but they seemed to carry a message from the mountains. They mingled with the sound of the wind sweeping down from the mountain slopes, as if recounting the sorrows witnessed over the years. The young people approached this music with a different kind of respect, sitting in front of the cabin in the evenings to listen to him. Sometimes in silence, sometimes lying on the grass. Tom would greet them with a slight smile, and no further words were needed. But for the adults in the village, Tom was just that old man. Sometimes they would laugh behind his back, saying, "Uncle Tom is singing to the mountain again." Yet for Mia, this man was a mystery. Mia was a young woman who had been born in the village and lived with the dreams she had grown up with there. She would return during high school breaks and rediscover the various beauties of quiet evenings. But what she loved most was listening to Tom's guitar. She didn't just listen to the melodies, she also watched his hands. There was something about those hands, steady, bearing the marks of the years but unshaken. A story. And Mia was determined to unravel it. Tom's guitar case was always slightly bulging. Mia noticed this from the outside, but she never asked anyone about it. Maybe extra nails, maybe a notebook, maybe more. But the answer began to emerge that night. It was a cool but bright night in July 2025. A traditional summer celebration was taking place in the village square. In the center was a large campfire, surrounded by children, young people, and the elderly. Some were playing guitar, others were dancing. Mia was sitting a little behind the fire with her friends. Then, suddenly, Tom appeared. He carried his guitar on his shoulder, walking slowly but confidently. The crowd fell silent for a moment, but soon everyone returned to their old habits. Only Mia was paying attention. Tom sat down near the fire. He took his guitar in his lap, bowed his head slightly, and began to play. This was unlike any melody heard before. It was deep, emotional, and yet indescribable, like a cry. It was as if it were a story told in the language of the mountains, but one that resonated in people's hearts. Mia's eyes filled with tears. Those around her fell silent. No one spoke, they just listened. When the song ended, Mia was the first to break the silence. "Uncle Tom, where did you learn this song?" Tom paused for a moment. He placed his guitar on his lap. He pressed his hands against his knees and looked ahead. Then he turned his eyes to Mia. He didn't smile. But his voice was soft. "Long ago," he said. "I was at war." The crowd fell silent again. Some murmured. Some were thoughtful. But for Mia, everything was just beginning. This old man, with his simple music and quiet demeanor, carried a story as deep as the high mountains. And Mia would not stop listening to this melody. That night, as the campfire died down, Mia approached Tom. "You were really at war?" "Where?" Tom slowly opened his guitar case. He took out an envelope. It was yellowed, the edges curled. He handed it to Mia. "This is a memento of a promise." But the story is long. I've kept silent for years. Perhaps the time has come. And that night, Tom began to tell his story. But this was not just the melody of the mountain. This was the moment when a man's lost melody found its echo once more. Chapter 2, The Story of the Guitar, Extended Version. When Mia returned home that night, she couldn't sleep. Tom's words echoed in her ears, once upon a time. I was at war. There was a weight to that simple sentence, like a confession spoken with the burden of years. She opened her computer and typed into the search engine with trembling fingers, Thomas Eldridge Korean War. At first, nothing came up. However, upon further investigation, he found something among old archive documents, scanned newspaper clippings, and grainy black and white photographs. A report dated 1952 stated, the 12th Infantry Regiment on the Northern Front managed to stay together despite the harsh winter conditions thanks to an unexpected source of morale. The following sentence was particularly striking. One of the sergeants in the regiment kept the soldiers' spirits up by playing the guitar every night during guard duty. It was a melody that hung like a thin thread between the cold, fear, and death. The report did not mention the name, but there was a note, Sergeant T.E. Mia sighed. She knew who this Teeth was. He was the man she passed by every day, sometimes dismissing him as an odd old man, Tom Eldridge. The next morning, Mia woke up early. The sun had painted the snow-covered mountains a golden yellow. The air was cold, but there was an unbearable warmth inside her. She took a thermos of tea with her and walked to the cabin. Tom was sitting on the porch, wearing a woolen hat, holding his old guitar. The wooden neck seemed like an extension of his hands, as if he had grown old with that guitar. Mia took a few steps and stopped. Uncle Tom, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Did you play this guitar in Korea? Were you the one who encouraged the soldiers? Tom looked at the guitar strings. There was a long silence. Then he raised his head. His eyes were still soft, but there was a depth of history in them. Yes, he said slowly. But those melodies didn't stay there. They're still here, echoing in these mountains. Mia was silent for a moment, then sat down beside him. Why didn't you tell anyone? She asked. Why didn't you want to be remembered as a hero? Tom took a deep breath. He ran his fingers over the guitar strings. He played a note, simple but heartbreaking. Because heroism isn't something everyone applauds, he said. Sometimes it's just about staying silent. Sometimes it's about not showing your tears while carrying a friend's body on your back. Sometimes it's about knowing how to live like an ordinary person when you return home. His eyes drifted to the distant mountain slopes. I survived through music, Mia. Some people lay down their weapons, others their memories. I couldn't put down my guitar. Every string holds the face of a friend. Every chord holds a night, a fear, a hope. Mia's eyes filled with tears. Tom was reawakening the pain he had lived through with his music. But he was no longer alone. Now there was a young person listening to him. And perhaps, a village that would understand him. Tom returned to his guitar. He began to play a delicate melody. This time, Mia accompanied him, not just with her silence and tears, but with her heart. The gentle breeze around the cabin carried the melody up the mountain. That morning, the mountain became the keeper of another secret. Mia spread Tom's story throughout the village. At first, the villagers had only looked at the cabin with curiosity, but now they watched him carefully, greeting him silently. One day, an old man in a gray coat, leaning on his cane, came to Tom's cabin. His eyes were filled with tears. Thomas Eldridge, he asked, his voice cracking. Those songs kept me going in 1951. We were freezing in Korea. His name was Sam. He was an old soldier. With a tired yet proud expression, he recounted those nights. While fighting the cold and the fear of death in the trenches, he said a lieutenant would quietly play the guitar at night, and those melodies reminded people they weren't alone. Your songs brought some of them home, he said. At that moment, Tom fell silent for the first time in years. His face showed a mix of sadness and astonishment. The village was shaken by Sam's words. Now it wasn't just Mia, the elders, the young people, the farmers, the children, all of them began to look at Tom with new eyes. A week later, a local music festival was organized. The village square was decorated. Amidst colorful lights, balloons, and the scent of pastries rising from the village bakery, the villagers began to gather. For the first time, Tom's name was written on the festival poster, Master of Melody, Thomas Eldridge. That night, Tom put his cane aside, straightened his patched jacket, and took the stage. He picked up his rain-weathered guitar. At first, there was silence. Then that familiar melancholy melody rose. The melody mingled with the mountain breeze, enveloping the silence in the square. The children closed their eyes, the elderly took a deep breath. When the piece ended, the crowd was on its feet. The applause was not just for the music, it was an echoing thank you for surviving, enduring, and hoping. The next day, more people began to gather in front of the cabin. The sound of the guitar became a new tradition, blending with the evening breeze. One morning, Mia handed Tom a note. It had only one sentence written on it, "The village is proud of you." Tom took the note, placing it in his pocket with trembling fingers. "Perhaps the song from the mountain is still echoing," he said, smiling. Within a short time, he became known in the village as the Master of Melody. The local history museum asked Tom to display his guitar and a few notes he had used during the war. Tom agreed. At the ceremony, an elderly woman stepped forward with her cane. The crowd respectfully made way for her. "Those songs saved my son," she said, her eyes filled with tears. He clung to life with that melody. The crowd fell silent. Tom lowered his eyes for the first time. His face bore a mix of pride and the weight of the years. His voice trembling, he could only say, "I just played." They were fighting to live. When he returned to the cabin that night, a note was pinned to the window. "Your melody became our silent hero." Tom read the note, looked up at the sky. And perhaps for the first time, he felt he wasn't alone. Have you ever met someone like Tom? Someone who quietly performs heroism through melody? Share your thoughts in the comments and remember, heroism doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it whispers through a melody.